Good morning, everybody. Professor Ford here. I just wanted to do a short video to recap what was an excellent discussion week here in MPA 752 and to go over the second assignment expectations with you in case you haven't had a chance to take a look at that online yet. So I'm taking a look right now at your discussions, and overall I think you did an excellent job in dealing with some pretty difficult material. Academics, I'm not going to say we're the worst, but we can be the worst. We don't always write well. We don't always write with the practitioner in mind. And in budgeting in particular, I find that there's quite a distance between some of the best research out there and practice. And I think that's a problem. I think that hurts the relevancy of our research and also possibly deprives the practitioner of some good ideas and techniques. But nonetheless, I'm glad that you had a chance to take a look at these classic articles, because it really is going to be folks like you who are actually going to need to bridge that divide, or be able to bridge that divide. So let's go over some of these articles very quickly. The first one, Local Budgeting and Finance, 25 Years of Development, is pretty much a survey article. So it's not surveying people, but it's surveying the state of the literature on local budgeting and finance up until, I believe, about 2005 when that was written. And certainly there's been some more in-depth research that has occurred since 2005, but the article really does give us a nice overview of where the academic research, in kind of the heyday of budgeting research, what that has told us. And as many of you pointed out, some of the strengths of the article is that it's very comprehensive. But yes, one of the big weaknesses is that all of those articles come from a single budgeting journal. Now, it's the top budgeting journal, so that is meant to be that this is kind of the best thought, the best research that has been done on the topic. But that does invite limitations, especially in an interdisciplinary field like public administration, where you can have very good ideas that come from maybe outside of the dominant budgeting literature. That might be ideas that come from the nonprofit sector, ideas that might come from the private sector, but nonetheless apply very well to the public sector. But anyways, if you weren't assigned that article, the Mullins and Pagano, Local Budgeting and Finance, 25 Years of Development, that is one that's worth taking a look at, or at the very least, and I encourage all of you to do this for all of the message boards, go take a look and see what your classmates had to say about them in terms of summarizing them. Because that is kind of a nice way to understand how a student, a practitioner, so folks like yourself, how they interpret the usefulness of this article. And to me, when I really read Local Budgeting and Finance, 25 Years of Development, my big takeaway is that, man, we had a long way to go. That there are these kind of breakthroughs in budgeting methodology that they're pretty minor. They're kind of nibbling around the edges, and maybe that's okay. Maybe that's by design. Maybe we shouldn't have wild swings in the way we study and do public sector budgeting. But nonetheless, it is a reminder that the kind of innovations that have occurred, they've been slow. So anyways, Mullins and Pagano. And then the next one, the lucky folks who got to read The Road to PPB. That's a tough one, right? That article is not written in a way that is meant to be digestible. He kind of just goes right into it, and it's an older article, but it's relevant. And the reason I assigned it is that it is kind of known. It is known as the article that really kicked off the modern intellectual development of public sector budgeting. And so it really is a kind of a history article about how did we get to this point. And it is a difficult read, but I do think that the big takeaways of this article is that there is a connection. There are these linkages between the way local budgeting was done during the machine politics era, where it wasn't really done, up to that 1907, the New York Bureau of Research, and then how eventually we muddled our way through to get to a point where we've added narratives to budgets. We've taken this concept that we don't just care about inputs, and it's not just about accountability for money spent. It's really about understanding what are we getting for the money that we're spending. How do we actually design a plan that can be not only useful from a transparency standpoint, but useful from an informing of practice standpoint? In other words, how can we get the spending and performance data all in one place in a way that actually improves the way we manage our public sector organizations? And we've evolved after PPB, but I think that really does represent this important break point where we had a fundamental shift in the philosophy of budgeting from just line items and transparency to more of this, how do we use budgeting as a management tool to improve performance? The next article, Decision Strategies of the Legislative Budget Analyst. This one, I like this one for a couple reasons. One, it's taking us from the local level to the state level, but it's really framing what's going to be our second assignment, which is where you get to all pretend to be a Legislative Fiscal Bureau budget analyst. And it's a reminder of the fact that the individuals, the bureaucrats, the state employees that we ask to analyze budgets and analyze fiscal information and to present options to the legislature have a great deal of power in how decisions actually get made. So think of it this way. We've talked about principal agent theory and how legislators and executives within public sector organizations, they might not be experts in everything. That puts them at a disadvantage compared to the experts, and those are the agents. The individuals who actually understand how the bureaucracy works, and in this case understand what the fiscal implications of proposed budgetary decisions or policy decisions would be. And even though a legislative budget analyst doesn't have the ability to write legislation, they have the ability to frame the debate. So let's say that I want to make a change in shared revenue. So I am a legislator, and I'm thinking, you know what? The big thing I care about is I want to have a different way of sending money from the state government to local government. I think the formula we use, which we don't really use anymore, is outdated. I want to do something about it. That's great. So I have this kind of 30,000-foot conceptualization of what I care about in terms of how I'm going to reform shared revenue. What I don't have is the specific expertise. So if I was in Wisconsin, I'd go to the Legislative Fiscal Bureau and say, here's the broad outline of what I want to do. Can you give me some options? It's going to be those legislative budget analysts that actually write up a paper and present a set of options and say that, okay, here are 4 things you can do to get at that problem. Well, the way in which that budget analyst approaches their job, their background, their biases, but really what this article was saying was more that their approach. Do they see themselves as serving the executive? Do they see themselves as serving the legislature? Do they see themselves somehow somewhere else? But the way they present those options is going to frame and really put the it's the word I'm looking for here. I'm obviously not finding it, huh? It's going to frame, I'll just keep saying frame. It's going to frame the debate. It's going to show that, how far in one direction we can go, how far in the other direction we can go. And this will hopefully make more sense when you go about your second written assignment, where you are a budget analyst and you're actually going to analyze a real budget paper. But again, the big takeaway here is that you can't take the human beings away from the budgeting process, specifically when you're dealing with budget analysts, because even though the budget analyst is not coming up with policy, they're not figuring out the intent of the legislator, they are framing the debate by presenting the information in a way that might favor one decision or another. And that's not a good or a bad thing, that's just the reality. And it was really cool to see somebody study this. The next one, budgetary balance from Dr. Lewis. And I thought she did an awesome job in this article. This is one of my favorites because there's this article came out well before the movie Moneyball, but there is this idea that we could just find that one perfect indicator, and that can tell us about fiscal health. If we can just figure out, this one ratio, we can understand if a municipality is doing well or not doing well. And for years, people tried to use this idea of budgetary balance. Like, is the budget balanced or is it not balanced? And a balanced budget just means that the amount of money going out is the same as the amount of money coming in. Okay? That's something we want, right? But we're not going into debt. But think of the way you might balance a budget in your own personal life. You might budget. You might have a balanced budget by the fact that, okay, you planned, you made sure you spent, you had your bills covered, you had all your recreational money in one pot, and at the end of the month you were balanced. That's great. Another person might have a balanced budget, but they paid their bills by selling a car, paid their bills by getting a payday loan. In other words, ways that are indicative of a financial situation that is very unhealthy. But nonetheless, on paper, they both seem balanced. So what Lewis was doing by looking at these 100 largest cities in the U.S., or 100 large cities in the U.S., was just saying that, this might not be the best way for us to measure financial health. It's one indicator among many. And it's like when you take analytic methods with me, this idea that we want to triangulate, that if you really want to understand, really apply an analytic method in the correct way, it's best to have more than one indicator for whatever concept you're trying to measure, because a single indicator can be manipulated, can be misleading, it can be incomplete. And Lewis, she did an awesome job of just pointing out that fundamental truth. And in this one in particular, I thought that many of your critiques were right on track, saying that, it's a limited data set she was using. It'd be interesting to do this with smaller municipalities. It'd be interesting to try to do this research, different geographic areas, maybe in different legal and policy contexts. But nonetheless, good article. Another good article, why it's a classic, Budgeting by the Ballot. This concept that maybe we should just have direct democracy, maybe referendums, and maybe asking the people directly what, in this case in the state of Montana, directly what they want to do with the state's resources is a better idea than kind of this Republican form of government where we elect somebody and they make the decisions on behalf of the electorate. And there always is this fundamental tension. Sometimes it's baked into the legal context. State of Michigan, state of Wisconsin, they both, and other states as well, but those two come to mind right off the bat, have these mechanisms for local referendums where you can have a vote to raise property taxes, to exceed tax levies. That's the people directly making that decision. And there's strengths and there's weaknesses to that. But oftentimes we stick to the idea of Republican form of government where we elect some board, some council, some legislature, and they're the ones setting the tax levy. And if we don't like what's happening with that, we can vote people out of office, kind of that democratic mechanism of accountability. Well, Montana in the 70s went pretty far onto the direct democracy side. And this article does a good job of pointing out some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses to that approach. Some of the strengths is that there is a built-in legitimacy and credibility, and frankly, I get that, this idea that we should, if it's our money, why not ask us directly what we want to do with it? At the same time, as was exposed in Montana, it brings a practical governing challenge, because if you ask people if they want a tax cut, they're probably going to say yes. That's just, right, that seems to be human nature. But anyways, good article, good comments about it, good discussion of the strengths and weaknesses. And I thought really even some of that discussion on there was challenging. And what I mean by that was that I think that strong cases were made in both ways. That there's a lot of good that can come from this type of idea, despite the management challenges. But there is perhaps this insurmountable governing challenge of it's just not financially sustainable. But anyways, I appreciate the patience that you all had in discussing these academic articles. They were not easy, but it's a master's level course. I wanted to expose you to the classics, and I especially enjoyed reading the message boards in your discussion where you talked about the future research that might be built off of these points, because that's really where we start to continue the discussion on public sector budgeting. Hopefully you all checked and saw that I had graded all of your written assignments, and by and large those were very well done. And especially, again, given some of the material, I know that's difficult to write about it. It's difficult to read. It's even more difficult to write and talk about it, but that's why the assignment was structured as it was, to force you to react to these difficult readings. This week I will be posting your participation grades as well. And by and large, I have the statistics and I've read through them all. You've done a good job. I know I weighed in a few times, but this was a case where you all were doing a great job, so I didn't feel the need to screw up your excellent discussion. Now, moving forward, our second assignment, which the email that I'm going to send right after I record this will have that attached to it, is going to be due November 5th, so at the start of Course 4. And this is evaluating and presenting a state budget paper. So here we're really moving on to our kind of from the local budgeting to state budgeting. And you will have the ability to go and pick a Legislative Fiscal Bureau budget paper of your choice, so a real budget paper in the state of Wisconsin of your choice, and evaluate it and do a presentation about it. So the two key components of this is going to be, first, this 3 to 4 page paper, which walks through the policy area you chose, where you interpret the proposals that were proposals that were made by the Legislative Fiscal Bureau and makes a recommendation. But then the fun part is where you will create a PowerPoint slide, and you will record yourself talking on a PowerPoint slide for about 12 to 15 minutes, where you are presenting your paper and making a case for your preferred approach. I will do a little recording about that assignment in the near future as well, but I did want to send it around and give you an idea of what that's going to be. So that will not be due until November 5th, the start of our 4th course. And I'll be in touch, as always, with information about Class 3 as we get closer to it. But for now, I hope that you enjoy your week and your little respite from the wonderful world of budgeting. And I encourage you, if you haven't yet, to really start thinking about what municipality you'd like to do for your final project, because our Course 3 is going to be almost solely focused on how you can complete that final project. So with that, I hope you have yourself a great week, and I will be in touch soon.